And I'm sure if it's something that's traumatic, it's similar thing, but on a different same side of the same coin. Whereas it's something that you go over again and again in your head, you replay it, and it sort of becomes a part of you. And giving that up for the sake of healing of the group is something that that's the aloofness I think Grease is pointing to. I need to catch up on these chats though. I'm curious that the difference of people who go through trauma deliberately alone versus community.
I did answer that, yeah.
What was your answer to that? So I don't have to click on the chat.
I'll just read it. So I said everyone has trauma affect them differently. Some people have to go through the process alone. It's the only way they can do it. Some rely on community. Like if you don't know even where to start, community is the best, and you make your way around. For some, it's an incredibly personal and private process that they just can't let anyone in. So there is a difference to it. Working through trauma, say from rape, versus working through childhood abuse or bullying or something like that. So yeah, it's different for everybody. Ideally, you would do both if you could, but not everyone can have a high level of vulnerability or trust, or allow others to get into their process of revisiting those events that caused it.
Some of your points, but those are very important. Sorry.
True community means giving up autonomy. It's involuntary. Voluntary communities are inherently weak.
I'm not sure about that comment, Fleetus. Autonomy is one of the terms I've been working very hard to teach my son when he had to go into the group home during the divorce we went through. And I needed somehow to replace independent or independence and his understanding of what he thought that meant and how that played out in a lot of anger and things that went around how he dealt with that whole time and transition. So to me, autonomy in that context very much had to be something that was intentionally taught and intentionally owned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Flipper's getting quite a bit of pushback in the I've mind, it seems.
And I can leave anytime.
Anything combine a community, there are anarchist club. I agree with that. That's sort of what I was pointed to by all community are inherently spiritual because there's a bigger thing that has to hold them together. Anyway, so voluntary communities are more resilient. Flibus is pushing back. If you can leave any community with no consequence, it is not a true community.
I have a question regarding that because...
What is a community you can't leave? I just need an example. Give me one example of a community you can't leave. Anyway, I'm sorry, Sandy. Phlebas might answer that one. Go ahead, Sandy.
Phlebas can answer it because I was going to ask a follow-up question, and I will give you an answer, but I'm curious.
Flipper's did answer. His example is the reason your families are strong, but is because you cannot leave.
Depends how you view family. If it's atomized and it's the nuclear family, or if it's an extended family.
Try telling that to a whole bunch of deadbeat dads.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, go ahead and continue, Teo.
No, go for it.
That was it?
I'm reading the chat.
I was thinking of family, but I was thinking of family in the context that there's something that Paul put out that I have not listened to because of whatever it was that he said that Phlebas's comment reminded me of that I'm avoiding. The whole, and I know it comes up in my memoir, and which is what I'm trying to get at, and which is why I was avoiding Paul's thing, because it wouldn't be a healthy place to go today. Let's put it that, or yesterday, or whatever day it was I was going to think about it, because it comes down to, what does leave mean? You can leave something. Like, I was thinking, if family is a strong connection because it's a healthy, strong connection, then not being able to leave is not a bad thing. If family is a strong connection because it has too many unhealthy attachments to places that you're in, one of several processes that I suspect that Andre brought up, then family is a strong connection because it's a very unhealthy, strong, permanent connection. And whether you want it to or not, it keeps reappearing, sometimes at inappropriate moments.
Andrea, you're going mad in the chat. What have you got to say?
Oh, I just disagree with what he said. It's wrong. He said, like, where was it? Neighborhood is an example. You can't just move. You were in a community involuntarily. Like, no, you can just move. Like, it's
What was the
entirely
original
voluntary.
question that Trey asked?
Sorry, what was that, Gavin?
What was the original question that Trey asked?
What's the strongest community you've been a part of?
Yeah.
And then the follow-up question is, the follow-up question was in response to trauma bond, which was, what do you lose in sharing that trauma bond?
Yeah, it's kind of like the darkest place you've been and the people that were with you in that dark place that helped you get through it. Whether you're a soldier that was in a war zone or wherever, that can be a metaphor. I imagine that's where there's the best opportunity for having the strongest community.
Are we saying that the strongest community are held together by negative experiences?
I feel like it's connected to it, but maybe not. That's not necessarily what holds it together, but there's the opportunity in a bad experience. There's an opportunity to find people and support people who've gone through that valley, that dark place, and we all have different ones that we maybe go through.
I think, because I was thinking that actually maps on quite nicely with the Christian and church experience, is you have to come to a place of humility where you don't know what's going on, and you have to relieve control to.
Have you ever had a coach, like, even you pointed at sports? It's like, have you ever had a coach where all of a sudden it's like, you're down in the game, or maybe you're down in the season, or maybe you've been down over the years as part of the team, and all of a sudden things get turned around and everybody there works to do what they need to do, and you come out as champions, right? It's like, I don't know, those are pretty overcoming adversity together as a team and being able to support each other as a team is pretty amazing experience.
Let's try to get set up. Let me go rid of CW. Flibbers makes a fair point, though. Part of the reason church cannot be exclusively identified with the institutional programs is that being part of her is not merely a voluntary association. So that's to the point of involuntary communities are stronger than voluntary communities.
So,
can you explain that to me? Phlebas is church is one of my trigger points. Sorry.
Is this thing working or no?
Yeah, Chad, you're here. Go for it.
Okay, so I'll just lay out some of my own experience with some of this stuff. I personally am not really I'm not really keen on the whole trauma bonding community phrasing, that frame. It's not something I don't know. It's one of those things that pokes me in the axiom somewhere, and I have to really examine that. But so then part of my experience is this. So like just from the literature that helped me to get integrated into a particular community. So in the AA book, right in the first, or it's like the second chapter, it's called "There's a Solution." There's a line in there that says, "Having shared in common peril is only one of the elements that go into this binding cement that binds us, but that in itself would never hold us together. But having shared in a common solution, one that we can agree upon on, and one that we can engage with brotherly and harmonious action, has brought about this tremendous fact in our lives." So that's like that's kind of a spiritual principle that I try to see the frame through. It's difficult too, because like it's,
No, that's
what's that?
No, keep going.
Chad, I was just going to mention there might be some people who have never encountered a solution. So like from the perspective of a person who's never had the opportunity to have the victory or experience the collaboration and dealing with the valley, then they don't have what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a different topic. So I'm just laying out my experience about, to answer the question of what's the strongest community. It's the one that I've engaged with a common solution with. And I didn't even have to like the solution, right? That was a big part. Like a lot of it was quite annoying to me. It's like, and nobody was making me do it either. Like I had to basically bend the knee to this solution because I was unable to bring about a solution on my own in any other way. So there's that. Now here's a really strange thing. So I'll lay out some of the traumas, because like I don't like to, this is annoying. So I was born with a cleft lip and cleft palate, and I had this birth defect that was glaring, especially in a student, being a student amongst other students, and these kids were like vicious. They said all sorts of crazy shit, like things.
I was a vicious kid.
Very inventive things that you cannot believe, right? And I was jumped and beat up merely because of this, and then maybe also because I was kind of acting out. But so for like my whole life, all the way into adulthood, into my late 20s, I couldn't think about myself without also thinking about the fact that I had this cleft lip and cleft palate. So like it was very much a part of my identity of who I was. Like I couldn't separate that from me. So it was, I guess in that way, it was like this trauma that I had always carried around with me. And what had happened was, through the process of the solution that was offered to me, that I decided to submit to, all sorts of weird things happened. Like, so when I was a kid, we used to, when we'd go over the railroad track, my mom's boyfriend would always say, when we're going over the railroad track, lift your feet and touch the glass. So I had this superstition around that. And then eventually, like a year into sobriety, one day I was doing it just completely automatic, right? I'd lift my feet and touch the glass. And I was like, why the fuck do I keep doing that? That's so stupid. And so what happened was I had to consciously and intentionally not do that every time I would approach a railroad track. And one day it just vanished. It was like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. So it's little things like that. And then all of a sudden, I started to notice that I don't identify at all with having this cleft lip and cleft palate anymore. Like it doesn't even enter my mind. Only in like when we're talking about things like this, where I can bring this up as an example of how I become separated and fragmented from the identity that I once had, because I had made a decision to submit to this stupid fucking process of working these stupid steps and seeking God, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to, and because I couldn't bear the idea of suffering pointlessly anymore, and so I had to suffer with a purpose. And what I found was these stupid steps. I would also say, and you can people can disagree with me all they want, but this process of the steps, it replicates across. It scales out, not up, and that too scales out, because it all addresses the same problem, which is a spiritual malady, which is basically a conscious separation between me and my fellows, me and my identity, and me and God, and that's all it addresses. So that's why I keep bringing it up. I'm such a weirdo. Thank you guys. Love you, and I'll listen. Bye.
You're not a weirdo, Chad.
I'm going to disagree with Chad. I want to say out and up. It doesn't have to be either one. It can be both, out and up.
Yeah.
Because it's like a sandcastle. Like you keep dropping sand. John Vervaeke had that imagery at one point, and it will go out and up.
But it's. I think. I think I agree with you as well. But I don't think. I think you can't be intentionally trying to build up just a thin sandcastle. It's more likely to collapse. If you're trying to build a wide one, the boundaries itself will be such that it starts building up. If that makes sense, analogy.
Yeah. Or if you don't know what you're building, but you know you need to build something, like in the case of processing trauma, like you don't know where to start, you know you need to do something. You come together with these people and sort of like, okay, well, help me like point around and figure out. So you sprinkling sand around, but then eventually it starts to form either into being thin or being fat or whatever you want. And then you go, oh, I see what it's making now. I can sort of see the telos and the direction. I've got an idea of what to do or where to start.
But are there success stories in those communities, those trauma-based communities?
Well, okay, so this is why I said, that's why I said not specifically trauma communities, because I'm not in them, but it's more mental health oriented, like not just people going through trauma, but suffering from depression and anxiety mostly, or have suicide attempts, so on. Because that way you get more of the framework, you get more perspective, and you don't just get answers from everyone who's traumatized. You get answers from the different, and you get people who have clearer heads and can see outside of things you can't see, but also ones who have gone through your experiences and can relate, because you just cannot relate to someone else most of the time that hasn't gone through your experience directly. So if you haven't been raped, you can't really speak to what rape is like, because it's not something you can ever know unless it's happened to you. But you can give empathy, support, compassion, like all these other things. You can help someone like deal with it, but you can't speak to like their lived experience in that way. So it needs to be a mixture.
I would agree. I would also, does this go back to what I said about types of communities too, in the sense that like you might not have the exact same experience as a particular person or community, but there's been times when overlapping areas have allowed, like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like generally, people who have trauma will probably have PTSD. It's very likely, but there's also complex PTSD now, which is like I was told I have a form of it because I was bullied like all throughout school, and so it's not the same as me going through a war, having shell shock, and having like traditional PTSD. But it's similar. But you don't get like the traditional PTSD things of like flashbulb memories where like a red room with like this symbol in it and like a certain smell suddenly goes like that, and you're like, oh, I'm reliving that experience of the worst thing happening to me, but it's still building trauma. So a mixture of people going through similar experiences allows you to process that.
Well, it's interesting. There's if you could take a model that works and attempt to scale it out. So like, say that the AA model, there's probably patterns in there which can work with different kinds of different kinds of people who have different experiences, right? So I mean, that's what's interesting to me is like, not just that we find people who have suffered like us, but also find people who have suffered like us and have come out the other side, maybe even better for it. Who say, yeah, it was terrible, was there. And they were there, they can talk about it, but then they, they're kind of a shining light. It's like, yeah, it happened to them somehow. They look, I want what they have. And then, so yeah, it's nice if there can be the testimonies of people who have had success instead of, a system pushing you through something where people are making money and gaining wealth. Like there's sometimes a conflict of interest between, getting a degree and having a job and making money to go through and check the boxes so that you can form a diagnosis to then prescribe a medicine, prescribe a pill. I hate to even call it medicine sometimes, but it would be nice if that these people are in the right relationship and such that there's love, and it's connected to success stories of people who have the best success stories. Like it needs to be real.
This is one of the reasons I like having a mixture of communities, because of the perspectives coming from, different directions. Like going back to Andre's point about CPTSD, I hadn't even heard the term until maybe
new to the DSM-4. That's why. It's new to the DSM-4. That's why it didn't exist before that.
Well, I went through an assessment in the psychiatry department down at the local hospital while going through my divorce, because I was having a really hard time processing some of the things that went into the reason for the divorce and why that was the timing and the choice, and then I asked my GP for a follow-up assessment, sort of just maybe 2021-ish, maybe, or 2022 early, just as we started to come out of the whole COVID thing, because because that whole time frame, plus the fact that my current partner died in 2021, sort of right in the middle of all that chaos, I wanted to know why, instead of going into normal grieving, I suddenly flashed back to a place where my whole body was reprocessing 2016 and earlier. And I went, what the heck? Like, this has nothing to do with that. Like, what the heck? So then I went for a series of assessments, and that was the question that came up was, so is this something you went through just with the marriage or the divorce, or was this something that you also experienced in your nuclear family, like my growing up? And I was like, oh, well, and it reminded me of all those, Jacob's got some discussion around some of the circle things they use in the women's shelters. And I don't know if men's shelters or programs have anything similar, but I found myself sitting with these stupid forms going, I feel like an idiot because I'm being asked straight up questions. And this would be pre-2016. And they would come down to, so are you experiencing X or Y abuse? And I'd go, no, well, not really, not unless you count. And then I'd find myself saying something really stupid. And I'd eventually just look at the assessor's face and go, oh, yeah, well, oh, okay. Because to me, abuse didn't have that many labels. Therefore, trauma didn't have that many labels. Therefore, and I'm one of these people that think in layers, and I had too many therefores. And church became one of the triggers because I would go to church to my friends who I really trusted. And of course, we'd sit there and pray about things, and we'd do this or that. And I also, post-divorce, several years later, got a very heartfelt apology from the pastor at the church that we had been attending for a couple of things that basically came down to, I am so sorry. We thought X, Y, or Z would help and didn't realize point whatever. And I'm like, no, because why would they? It's not like it's like saying somebody, when you referred to somebody who hasn't experienced rape, being able to actually understand somebody who's talking about it and make a coherent, valid response to something that's said in the subtext instead of what they're getting out. Well, why would you?
Yeah.
Which goes to places where I'm thinking, yeah, the out and up. Whoops, we've just lost Gavin as I say out and up.
Yeah, I have to step away. I'm going to go into the background.
Okay. But what you were saying, Gavin was saying about the out and up, that to me is an important framing of this, because I think that's probably relatable in more places than people realize.
Right.
In terms of how communities, how we interact in communities, how we impact them and they impact us.
Yeah. I think also the idea of like, is a community prospering and does it have success stories? Like, that's important, but it's also not important because for some people it's like the Vivekian paratelic. You're not aiming at a specific goal, you're aiming at the process, and some people have to do the process first and engage in that, and then they can set the goal and orientation. So when you're first dealing with something like trauma, like, you don't really know where to start. You don't know that you can fix it or like what you're aiming at, but you need to work through it. You sort of go through it blindly a bit, have support, and then you do get to a point you're like, okay, like I can conquer this. It's always going to be part of my narrative and my life history, and I can't delete it, but I can integrate it, I can process it, I can accept it, and that is sort of the goal I have now. But when you don't have that agency and autonomy and power given from the process, you don't believe it is possible because it's so overwhelming and distressing. It is just blocking everything in front of you. It's like, okay, well, I can't do this because I'm traumatized. Like, so I'm not the sort of person who can identify with being able to do this thing. Like, I can't be in a sports team because like I've got PTSD from war. And like, what if someone like if they have the flare gun and I'm like, oh, someone's shooting at me, like that's just not something I can do. But if you work through like that shell shock and like PTSD, it's like, okay, well, I can identify triggers. I can put myself in scenarios where it doesn't happen, or I can learn to like reduce the stimuli so that doesn't happen to me. Or if it does, I don't sink into that space again. But it's a tandem process, I think, the process and the goal. And you're not going to really have any success stories if you don't allow both those things. When Chad's talking about AA as well, like, I think you can apply some of that to these issues. I don't know the exact steps, so I don't know if it works in the same way. But I also don't think everyone who necessarily goes through this stuff is spiritually bereft or like seeking. They might like think that's fine, and it's much more of an emotional problem, psychological, and that's what they need to deal with. They don't need to be told, okay, just go to a church, go seek God, like that will sort you out. It's and the basic level can be just phenomenological. You don't want to be sinking back into a memory of the past, of the worst thing that happened in your life, and have someone say, well, okay, like how much do you pray? Like, it doesn't matter, because your lived experience is like you keep just floating back to that point from tiny triggers, and you need to stop that from happening. Then you can point towards the good and God and seek that later. But that comes after, because God will always be there for you. But if it's a blockage, then blockage is not going to move away until you do.
I do have to head off soon, but so much to say. Firstly, I really appreciated just going all the way back to Chad, to when Chad popped on, and the reframing from trauma abundant to solution. I think is very, very important, because when I think to examples, like try to imagine a community centered around trauma, I imagine something like the deconstruction movement, who all get together because of their traumatic experience, and eventually they're all separate because they find different solutions, different things to fill up what they've just pulled out. So if the solution is the same, you're more likely to stick together. So that was very helpful. And a lot of what you two are saying makes me think, especially what you said last, Andrea, about the evangelical conversation that Christian Baxter was pointing to. And now that's sort of the evangelical trope is, have you prayed? What's the, just go straight to the solutions that they know works, rather than, I think a better approach is what I think Luke means when he talks about personalism and individualism, is befriending someone so that you can earn their trust enough to that they'll share their story with you. And that I think at that point, you're more likely to get through with either the process or the solution. But I think the first step is, to me, friendship. But I do have to go. I've got a football match in a couple hours, so catch you guys later.
Nice.
Okay.
God bless.
Thanks, Teo. God bless. Yeah, to what Teo was saying and what you just said, I liked the word tandem, and it reminded me of a conversation a while ago where I was trying to explain. There was a comment that flashed across the bottom of the stream about.
Oh yeah, does one of us have power for the comments and stuff?
Yes, that's why I came back. Well, not for that. No. To announce that Gavin's in the background, so he's looking after the stream.
Perfect.
But
Gavin is our protector. Thank you.
I hoped he was, from what he said. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. So there was a comment that was put across the screen about failure, or also being within the communities, and it was a few minutes ago, but it reminded me of some of what I'm trying to include in things I'm writing, and wouldn't have been able to 5 years ago. And a conversation online. Oh, my name memory really is terrible. But anyway, talking about vulnerability, where what it kind of centered around for me in that moment was, if I'm not allowed to fail, then I can't. I apologize to whoever it was, because the only way I can remember it was a comment on something to do in Jacob's channel with motherhood and how you referred to it. Let's just put it that way. I was bringing up a point of saying, in some of the best places with my children, in the difficult spots, if I hadn't been allowed to fail and seen as failing, I wouldn't have been able to point to some of those places where I love that you added in that in tandem with point, because I didn't have that sort of going in my mind at the time. But the failure in tandem with, how do you find solutions? Who are we as a community? What does it look like in our context? Any number of those kind of points is one of the reasons that I was trying to get at as a mother, or as anybody, but the context was in as a mother. You need to be able to fail in order to figure it out, in order to talk about it, so that you can do all the other, which is the out and up. You have to be able to shift out, join hands, go work together and work individually. And no matter how that looks for each person in the moment, hopefully you're together working through something and raising each other up.
Yeah, I totally agree. I brought this up with someone the other day, 20-something-year-olds who are building a family, or like their wife just got pregnant. They're like, oh, how do I prepare for fatherhood? Like, what books should I read? And they ask their friends, and they're like, okay, look, you can read as many books as you want, and I did. But the thing that first like made me aware as a father was holding my newborn baby, and then everything I learned, I sort of threw away because I learned how to be father as it happened, and I couldn't do that without. I couldn't do it with preparation. I couldn't do it until it happened, and you sort of learn as you go, and yeah, you'll make mistakes, but you work together in that team of like the wife and the father, or the father and the mother, to sort of be like, okay, how are we going to become better parents from the thing that we've like messed up on? Not mess up in like a huge issue, but like, okay, well, we should have disciplined the kid who like didn't eat his dinner tonight, and we sort of messed up there. So if it happens again, let's tell him like he can't have any dessert. That's probably a good solution. Work together to point towards that telos. But you have to fail because no one can be a successful parent like inherently and just never make a mistake. It's not possible. So failure has to be like part of the process. You have to be allowed to like both fail as a group and like go, okay, you messed up, I messed up, like we got this thing wrong. How could we get it right? Or like what did we do wrong? And what is the solution? But also individually, like you can't just go perfectly in a perfect path and be like, yep, definitely going the right direction. Like I know what I'm doing. So you just really don't. If you did, you wouldn't need that whole process on the group because you'd look at the trauma and go like, okay, X, Y, Z, I go that direction. That's how to fix it. I'll just do that because you don't need anyone else for that. So the fact that people do have these groups points towards the fact that like failure is just inevitable and like we have to do it. We need failure to learn in the world. We need mistakes in order to become better people and learn how to improve. It's just can't get around it.
I love this is going to sound really stupid. Yeah, so I'm writing a memoir on abuse, divorce, and all the billion failures. And I'm going to say to you, I absolutely love my life. And some of the things that I got to learn and the community in the church where we were is still, my ex and I have both commented on that being the one that we miss the most, which is hilarious because we succeeded in church ways and failed in family ways. They're big time and managed to be this weird, contradictory inspiration for people not going through some of the stuff we were going through, but dealing with all the sidebars like, autism and deafness and surgery. Synostosis, hanging out in the hospital. My mom said that we could give tours to. We knew it so well. Up on the plastics department, where they had the burns kids, the kids with the cleft palate, like Chad was talking about, and all the ones with anywhere else that was. And I'm like, ask me anything I really knew, and it had nothing to do with all the stuff that most people thought was the easy, normal part.
Yeah.
When I would hear people talking about how easy it is, I'm going, you probably had like this really steady example somewhere in your family or something that was a completely different script than the one I got handed. Because there really wasn't a good way for me to look people in the eye and say to them, oh yeah, this is my first. This is my practice baby. Look at all these wonderful things. This is how normal life is, and exactly what I'm completely equipped for. I was like, no, I seriously told people. I'm pretty sure God was laughing uproariously when He handed me that project. And at the same time, I look at some of the stuff my trauma counselor said to me, and I always had this weird thing, like 2 different school systems. Church I didn't grow up in for my main thing. Moved to a community where we knew nobody when our oldest hit kindergarten because all the extras kind of demanded that of our sense of integrity as parents, not wanting to shut them off and maybe getting to see him on weekends when we knew all this other stuff. And, And I look at all of that together and I think to myself, you know, I forget what my point was. I may come back to it at some point if I go back and listen to what I was saying.
Well, I've got a comment on it, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So I'm just the fact that I really do say I'm incredibly blessed.
Mm-hmm.
I know my trauma counselor. Yeah, she would just look at me because the goal I gave, the one that I had was, and I will apologize, I picked 2 people to walk me through 2016 forward.
Yeah.
The kindest lawyer that I could find, and lucked out into an amazing trauma counselor. And the assignment that I gave them was, everybody has to get out alive. We've all been through so much.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at it from, the lawyer told me I could probably go into being a paralegal and walking people through this stuff from what she learned from me. The trauma counselor basically, I think, had a whole heck of a lot of fun. Because she was able to look into all of the extra places that were trauma and also dug deep into my skill set. And she said to me, I've got a file cabinet full of 30 years of experience and stories that if I was allowed to pull them out, I would show you those to say, please believe me when I say you have the most incredible capacities, intuition, and blah, blah, whatever nice things she said of anybody I've worked with so far.
Mm-hmm.
And I hated that because I'm not really good at taking compliments, but I'm getting better.
It's tough.
But she's not wrong. That's what we have to give others. That's what we have. And that's what I've managed to find in the schools, with the teachers, with the teaching aides, with the psychologists, it comes down to what you were saying about that place where we work in tandem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say I love my life. I've been incredibly blessed by these people I've been able to meet and have conversations with. This just happens to be one of my most recent communities.
Yeah.
But that's basically a running thing in my life. I love it.
Yeah. What I'll say is that, like, when you say, like, well, I think you said, like, it's sort of ironic, like, I've gone through all this trauma, but I love my life. Like, I understand because you don't want to think about, like, the process getting there in a way because it was tough, but also you have a fondness for it. And what that is, I think, is that your fondness for that, the experiences, the places, the people, all that stuff, is your path towards growing, becoming a better person, and accepting what's happened and integrating it. And that is why there's such a strong draw towards it. Like, it's like, of course, you don't want to, like, be like, oh yeah, it was great when I was, like, on my mother's bedside as she was dying. I love being there. Like, no, you didn't love that. That was hard. But you can't forget it, because to get through that and be more resilient, you had to go through that. You grew from doing that. It hurt, but you got through that hurt, and you learned, like, you can survive that. So the process of, like, working through it, you go, yeah, I love that I've got through the process. I love that people came and helped me. In your case, the 2 specific people, or, like, whether it's a whole group or a community or whatever, even if it's just, like, one person who reaches out and it's like, hey, you need some help. Like, you're dealing with shit. I don't know how to, like, help completely, but do you need a hand? I have done that with a friend. I can't say the story too much because you probably actually know who it is and that I'm talking about her.
Yeah,
but,
I know. Okay.
Essentially, she was dating a guy, committed suicide in a way, very graphic, bad. She reached out to a Discord and was like, does anyone have the obituary? Because, like, I can't find it. Like, I don't know what's happening. I'm like, shit. She's in proper distress. No one else picked that up, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go message her. I'm like, you're working through some shit. Like, you need someone to be there. Do you need some help? Like, do you want to talk? I can just listen. Like, those sorts of things. And she had no one to really. It was first time, I think, for trauma. She had no one really to work through it with. I'm like, okay, look, I've gone through stuff like this myself, not the specific scenario, but very similar. Just tell me what you need to like do at this moment in time. Like, what's number one for you? Like, do you just need to talk? Do you need to like process what has happened? Are you still in shock? Like, what is it? Like, I'll help you with it. And over the course of months, she like prodded through, and then got to a stage where it's like, oh, okay, so accept it happened. It was terrible. Like, I love this guy, but I can't change the past. I don't feel like I'm distressed and traumatized anymore, but it's terrible. My emotions are more stable, and like we're still friends to this day after years. And conversely, like she's helped me through some of my hardest moments I've ever had. And even with suggestions like, I was in a very, very depressive episode once, maybe a crisis. And somehow from having a shower, I worked through years of depression because I turned it into like an invisible like punching bag or a puppet or something. And I was like, you know what, if I put depression over here and think of it like as something I've defeated, like, go away, I don't need you anymore. Like, you're not serving your purpose. Like leave. Like, there's a door. I'm like, oh, like I was giving it more power than it deserved. I was letting it constrain me. And I went through that process in my head. I'm like, I think I've just like solved years and years of depression. I don't know how. She said, get some paper, write down what you think you like did. Write down like the time, how you feel, and like where you felt that like you've come. And I've still got this in my drawer. I can't remember what I wrote down. I could get it out, but it was such a simple suggestion. I'm like, you know what? That's a really good idea, because this is like a cornerstone, or like a keystone moment in my sort of growth and like betterment. If I just let it slide and was like, okay, I made a lot of progress tonight, that's great. It would still be good. But if I actually mark it down, I'm like, okay, this is definitely important. I need to like make a special note of it. I pay more attention to it. I accept how much it really sort of meant to me, and it hit me a lot harder. I was like, you know what, like that was years of development in a shower, because I let my mind slip a little bit and went like, okay, let's reconceptualize and reframe how you're viewing this. It's not purely subjective now. It's placing it a little bit objectively, and from that I can sort of pull it out and be like, okay, depression is not me. It's this thing I have. If I have it as this thing I have, I can be like, okay, well, let's just make you a marionette. Let's make you like a puppet or like a fool, and like, I don't want you. Go away. Like, you're making things hard, and you don't give it the time, energy, and attention, as my friend Mark says all the time. I think it's a very intelligent thing to say. You don't pay it the power it's trying to take from you. Strip the power away, and you go like, no, go away. Like, stop making stuff hard. I'm going to move on. If you decide to visit back, I know how to kick you out again. And yeah, so the idea of approaching one person and reaching out because you've gone through that similar stuff can be extremely helpful. It's not something that everyone even needs to really do, because some people can't do it. Some people work through that trauma and they're like, okay, I can't go back there. I've accepted it, but I don't have the skills to help someone else. You can listen to them, you can support them, like, that's good. But to aid them through the trauma process, it's quite hard. And it just happens that like I'm good at it. I've gone through a lot of stuff, and I have the skills available. And I spotted someone who was like in need. And I was like, okay, you're in need. I can help. Do you want to like accept my like hand in this, and like you can slap it back, or do you want to sort of like try and figure things out just a little bit for today? Because if you get through that shock of today, from something tragic that's just happened. Like, you've gotten through one more day. Might delay the trauma a little bit, but you're going to feel better when you wake up and be like, okay, things are hard, but I feel like I can conquer it just a little bit. And you give yourself agency.
I think that's an important point that, and I think it relates to, I often find myself in conversation where Chad's bringing up some of his story and why for him the AA works, and I've had conversations where other people, like Jacob being one of them, says, but it's not the framing that everybody needs. But there is that same thing of saying you just get through that one more day. What you're getting through may be different depending on what the source of the issue is, or the source of the and why the choices might look different in terms of how you get through the day. Yeah, you do your thing. I'll just keep talking. You're answering something. Yeah, how you get through the day, but also like your story with your friend, what you notice. I went through 2, maybe 3 things. I went through last year and maybe the year before sending a tiny little book on grief that, I mean, I might not have even picked up off a shelf myself in a different time frame, but I sent to a whole bunch of people just because of how it framed it and how they might, you know. Yeah, one of whom, and to your point on, I've talked suicide with a number of people. One really cool kid I met, because he came into a coffee shop wanting to talk to somebody on that topic. And that was my introduction to him. And, you know, I still think he's amazing, but yeah, he's been through some stuff. And other people that I know who've been through the loss. That kind of loss is super layered. And yeah, I think being able to listen to people, just from the perspective that you were talking about, where you don't have to fix this.
Yeah.
You have to listen. You might want to repeat a couple of things back to somebody, or you might want to point in a direction like, have you thought about getting out some paper and writing this down? But yeah, and that being said, I know here at least there's a ton of there is at least 1 or 2 good courses people can take, and because I in mental health, I not only know people who in my friends network who died that
your mic, sorry, your mic went a bit muffled, that last sentence. Can you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say 2 things. You know, like, I don't only say this because I've walked through some of those places with people, but I also was a peer mentor in one of the local mental health agencies that I had participated in. I took some of their training, and one of the required courses, if you were going to do that, was one of 2, either the informal, cheaper, or if you're planning to work in the field, more slightly more expensive and week-long course on suicide. What happens, you know, like, what do you do if you have to talk to somebody? And those are good for a lot of people. I do, just as a sidebar, I recommend taking a course on that, even if it's a casual one, just so if something comes up, you might know what to say, or you might know what not to say. Also important.
I think everyone should, like, not have to take it, but they should, because even if you just learn to spot the signs, that's what a lot of people miss. And I hear from so many people who say, like, I can't believe, like, our friend is gone. Like, we didn't see the signs coming. Like, who could have known? And I just wish I was there, because I could have stopped him. Like, I could, if I could have gone over to his house that night, he would be alive today. I'm like, no, probably not. Like, he made up that decision a long time ago. And still, you may not have been able to change his mind at all. But knowing what to look for and be like, okay, this person's not just depressed, they're in actual crisis. And it's not just feeling sad, it's like complete worthlessness, despair, meaninglessness. Like, they've given up, and getting rid of all that pain is their only option, and it's like much more preferable to living through it. If you can spot that and you can know that they're in that position, you can at least be that listening person. Be like, okay, like let's talk. I'll just listen.
There's reasons I wish I knew some of that back when some of my friends went through that place. But even if I had, but I also for the fact, taking the course for the fact that I did try to talk to them, knowing you're not at fault. If you notice something and the person is still, like just so deeply enmeshed in this place that for whatever reason, you can't stop it, you still did the right thing.
Yep.
And you still will to grieve, and you still need to apply all that same stuff that you'll learn to yourself and how to get through that place. Because that's an easy place either.
And you did something rather than like absolutely nothing. Like you did the best you could do for what you knew. And that is so much more than just being like, oh, well, I didn't know that was going on. Like you at least spotted the person was in pain, and so much pain. Then it's one step further to be like, okay, I'll try and help. You're helping. You could listen to them for hours, and the next day they still commit suicide. You might not ever be able to stop them, but it's
the people that they leave behind who just need somebody who's not going to get all weird about it with them. That's so important too. And that's a hard place to walk too, because you don't have anything better to say there either. But there's ways in which being present, listening, and saying what you can, and reminding, people that you're open to talk, some of those key things you learn to offer when you take the courses. I don't think we realize how vital those are.
I tell people this all the time. It's like a lot of people on suicide's door who are like so close to committing it, like not just in ideation, but they've either gone through planning or like they've skipped planning entirely, and they're just like, okay, it's time to do it. The idea of how
ask that question, that was one of the things that really I could relate to why it's important. Totally different context in terms of why I was taking the course, but at the same time, when they said, don't be afraid to ask when you're listening, do you have a plan? Because nobody wants to ask that. Nobody wants to ask.
That's a good point. I've never asked that to anyone, but like I've sort of known, like I can tell when someone like is very serious about it, and I've stopped it. But I don't think that is something people ask. Like, have you planned it out? How are you going to do it? And they don't answer you. Like
that goes back to the vulnerability thing too, because like even for something like in what I was going through with the different types of abuse going on in my family, and the getting to a point of doing a divorce, if nobody ever asks you the questions, so what exactly are you talking about here? Or so do you have a plan for how you're going to handle this? I mean, I got eyeballed with that question by a minister at a little coffee shop. Same coffee shop. Anywho, nice. One of the people that really impressed me, because he actually walked up and said, I have a difficult question to ask you. Do you mind if I ask you it here? And I remember taking one look at him and just going, oh, uh-oh. And so I said, if I might cry, is that okay? And he went, oh, I'm not afraid of tears. So I said, then ask me. And that was the question. Are you experiencing abuse at home? How many people walk up to you in a coffee shop and say, hey, I've been watching this and this and this between, like you and your partner or husband or whoever. Yeah. And I want to ask you a tough question. Most people just kind of go, I want to see.
Yeah, they go, I hope it's not happening, but if it is, I guess I hope it stops. Like, no, if you confront them, be like, this is tough, but like, are you all right? Like, is abuse happening? That's confrontational for the person to ask, but it's also extremely confrontational for that person to answer too. To admit, like, yeah, this is happening. I need help.
It is confrontational, and that's not a word I would have put to it. But it's fun, it's funny because the other point I was thinking about was this is going to sound stupid. The other thing I was thinking about was football.
Okay, a little bit stupid, but go ahead.
Back in the early portion of the conversation, what is your strongest community? And somebody brought up football, and I was thinking about my partner, Jack, teacher, football coach, loved extreme canoeing. What do you call that? Whitewater.
Whitewater. Yeah, it's very fun.
So here's me coming out of a tough relationship where I still go to physio every single week because I want to stay working.
I remember that call, going to physio. Like,
yeah. And I'm like, because that dynamic between tension, memory, like basically the whole mind, body, emotions thing. Some days they work together and not in your favor.
Yeah.
So I had a ton of guilt from some of those places in my life where I first learned the CPTSD label.
Right.
And had to go, oh, yeah, maybe. yeah, that,
Yeah.
And then here comes my partner years and years later, who has a gobload of injuries from a ton of stuff that, like he chose to do and loved doing and enjoyed the communities around. And rather than laying on the guilt, you're broken, you're this, you're that, just kind of said, just took it as normal. Well, of course, this or that, you're broken. But it's not. But I watched him. He'd exercise every single day. He wouldn't go to physio.
Yeah.
But he did occasionally listen to the physio who dealt with the players on the teams, and he had a whole list of things that he did at home for himself, to maintain.
Right.
And so a lot of the stuff where you talk about dealing with things in tandem, I don't think we even intentionally sat down and had a conversation around it. We had conversations, which we both found like, oh, what? You mean you can talk about whatever? But in that particular context, his football community and his canoeing community in some ways are two of my favorite strong communities I never even participated in directly, because what you bring from your other communities into something together with people also is what I love about dynamic.
It's multiplicative in a way, like, because you bring your experience and like knowledge from those communities and bring it into the new one you're entering in, or like the one in tandem. Like, this is why I'm part of like half a dozen discords on different things, rather than like I'm only going to join like the depression discords because I've got a lot of depression. It's like, well, no, it would be an echo chamber. Like, yeah, I'm depressed too, but probably worse. Like, no, I'm more depressed than you. Like, well, yeah, everything's shit. Like, no, like, I'll join like the fluffy cat discord and be like, hey, here's my daily picture of my cat. Like, please give her like meows and like thumbs up, and I'll give her a pat. Because like, you focus your mind on something more important, something else. I
have a child who provides that without even owning a cat. Like, it's just memes. I'm like, oh.
But also, to your point, like, it's interesting you mentioned that, because there's that book, The Body Makes the Score, I think, by a Dutch guy.
I own it and have not read it yet, honestly.
Yeah, I've
hello.
Hey.
Hi, Dally.
You're a little bit muffled. Your audio is
okay. Okay, I'm going to change something. Okay.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
Or pop out in there.
Yeah, like a lot of people don't always, but they can store a lot of bodily trauma, and they don't realize. They think it's just like, oh, thinky talky, it's all up here. Like I've got to work through my brain, work through my mind. That's where it is. But it does store a lot in the body, and like there's neurobiological proof of it. And I haven't had a strong reaction to this, but I have had one where I was doing breath work with my breathwork coach, and he mentioned I can't remember the theory, but it's like you get like these involuntary shakes that can happen when you go through like a strong traumatic processing through breath work, and it's sort of like that trauma leaving the body. And I started doing it. I'm like, Steve, what's happening? Like, why am I sort of shivering and like it's what's happening? Like, wasn't convulsing, but something was off. And he's like, you're probably processing bodily trauma. Could be that, could be something else, but just consider that. Like, have you had trauma in the past? I'm like, yep. It's like, yeah. See how you feel in like 10 minutes, and like send me a message, and let me know like how you felt about that. Do you feel different? I'm like, yeah. It's like something's released. I don't know what, but yeah. I just feel better. And a lot of people store like almost entirely internally in the body, and so the process that all the stuff he was doing, like he wasn't like engaging in the thinky talky, but he was doing his communities, doing his exercise, doing stuff for himself. So in a way, he's working through what he needs to work through, in a different sense.
Right, and you know what's really interesting from my communities thing here is when I look at one of the people I've most enjoyed talking to the overlap about is my physiotherapist.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll tell them about what I'm listening to here. I'll tell them about some of my writing things. I'll tell them about like we'll chat about what's going on with the elements of life that I'm there for the physio. But we also talk about some of the other things because he knows that some of the stress layers. And I love him. He's trained in both sports injury and brain injury physiotherapy.
Wow.
And teaches. Yeah, so he's kind of cool guy. I really have had some good conversations with him that which is funny. So if you ask me where I did some of my mental health stuff, it would be at physio.
It makes so much sense. Like my osteopath, I saw 6 times maybe in total, and I probably like should keep seeing one, and it should have over years. But like, the clinic shut down. They went through like Medicare fraud, and the federal police came in. I lost 7 years of my both GP paperwork and case history and psychologist history. I'm like, okay, that's never coming back. So I can't do anything about it. But the osteopath, the thing I liked best about him was just his voice, not what he did, but like it was calm and welcoming. He's like, okay, you've got a lot of stress in your shoulders. Are you stressed right now? Like, how are you feeling? I'm like, yeah, like pretty anxious. It's like, yeah, it's like, okay, let me just do this shoulder and I'll get that knot out, and then tell me how you feel. And just that alone, I'm like, it's like he's talking me through the body pain of holding that anxiety in. And it's not what he's doing with his hands, it's how he's guiding me with his voice. I think it's
so. Here's an interesting question for you in terms of voice, which relates to a lot of the TLC stuff. Part of my, like, I'm pretty sure you've been here longer. You probably know a lot of the terminology better or differently than I do. And so earlier in the conversation, when deconstruction came up, I spent like a while looking up that and any related term.
I still don't know what it is. I assume it's when like you have a crisis with your Christianity. It's like, okay, I'll pull it apart, get the core parts, and like, what do I actually believe? you go through that process, and it seems like a lot of people on BOM are like, yeah, I want to be Orthodox, and that's just the answer. That's what most of them come to. But deconstruction, I believe, it's really like just a critique of like what do I actually believe? Do I want to be in a structure of like a denomination and just follow every rule and agree with everything, even if I don't fully believe it? Or do I want to like do something else? And that's as far as I really sort of can understand it.
I decided not on the action, like on the that end of it, but on the here's a term I'm starting to hear, and I'm missing all of the context of what people are saying because they're playing with the word differently than I am. So why? So then I immediately jumped into etymology and, the ways that I started by thinking, so I'm learning Hebrew, and we were talking about what are the root words and how do you, and I thought, why are they talking about taking the word apart when we approached it by starting with what is the base form and what do you add on?
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder why they do it that direction instead of the other way. So that's why I kind of went, oh, I like playing with words and word concepts. I'll come at it from that direction. I'm still trying to figure it out. So, but it's been a week.
Hello.
Hi, Jacob.
So, what's his name? Vanderclay's stream is going to be starting in like 10 to 15 minutes.
Yep.
You guys can keep on going until
I do want to go there and be and watch.
Yeah, I'm not going to let you guys stream while he's streaming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, why do they do that in Hebrew? Like I don't know.
What? I wasn't listening.
Sandy, could you like what was it you said? Like go from the root words.
We had just circled back to the beginning of. I had just circled back to the beginning of the conversation where somebody brought up deconstruction as a current running theme in some of what Paul's been talking about, and I said to Andre, "You've hung out here longer than me. You probably know some of the language and terminology, and I don't." Know that, let alone this has just popped onto my spectrum. I hit etymology and started looking at component parts and interrelated synonyms and stuff because I said I'm taking Hebrew, and the first thing that we that we're told is what's the root, not hey what's this. I mean I've seen one indigenous language, it looks like a mile long. If I want to start at the outer edges and start pulling the pieces off one by one. I appreciated the context, like with Rabbi Mallet, where he says, this is the root. Now, when you put this on the front or this on the back, and here's your, because I never really grasped prepositions and.
Well, I mean, English has prefixes and suffixes too.
They do, but my English teacher said, you are one of those people I hate who does not understand this at all and can use it impeccably. You irritate me.
Okay.
Harsh. Very harsh.
No. I mean, it's okay. She was a great teacher. So my thought was, if all this talk's coming up about deconstruction, do they know the root? Do they know?
Well, do they know? I mean, that's where the word deconstruction comes from. There's the prefix D and con and struct.
That was my road. That was my thought exactly. But I'm not sure do they understand that's the process they're going through?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I mean, that's part of the reason I think people use the word deconstruction.
But
do
they though? Like, because you can engage in deconstruction without understanding the word.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, anybody. I mean, it's possible for people to do that, but I think one of the reasons. So this is one of the things that happens. Etymology doesn't govern what a word means. So, for example, anti-Semitism.
It tells you where it's been.
Even that, it doesn't. So the word anti-Semitism, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with whether or not you're a Semite. So anti-Semitism was a word which 18th and 19th century, people in Germany used because they wanted to have a scientific word for why they should hate Jews. And that's what they called themselves, was anti-Semites, as a way of like making it sound scientific, right? And so nowadays people were like, well, Arabs are Semites too. And it's like, no, you have no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You're deconstructing a word. And so while, I mean, that's exactly what I was getting at. What Chad is saying is it's primarily involuntary, right?
Yeah.
Because we understand the word deconstruction because it has construction in it. And construction has structure in it, right? Yeah. So because we can relate it to other things we know, that helps us understand what each other are talking about. But let's face it, little kids learn to speak English without ever opening up a dictionary.
Yeah.
So in the way that I love playing with history of words and stuff, one of the things that I noted on my journey there was one of the sites said that it showed up around the 1600s. I'm gonna go back and look. I'm just saying. And one of the conversational points was that yes, it's a term used in construction and architecture, and you'll see it in other areas that actually speak to some of the physical structures of things, but also theologically. And I went, oh. So I haven't gone, like, I've only just, I'm curious. I like being curious about.
Curiosity is good. Chad, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. The "ite" suffix, can someone touch on it? Not sure what you mean.
Anti-Semite, maybe.
Well, anti-Semitism,
yeah, probably.
I mean, it started as a German word, but so anytime you have an ism, right? So you have communism and you have communist.
No.
So why isn't it anti-Semitist? I don't know.
Sure. It's a nuance. Like, why is it metaphysician rather than metaphysicist? Like, that's something that people pointed out to me. It's like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's metaphysician because physician deals with the body, whereas metaphysicist, like, it's metaphysics.
Sodomite. I mean, we also say Israelite, right? We say what else has the "ite" ending?
So Wiktionary gives a brief synopsis of it as a suffix, sometimes derogatory, used to form nouns denoting followers or adherents of a specified person, idea, doctrine, movement, etc., as in Adamsite, Campbellite, Jacobite, Laborite, Mansonite, Reaganite, Thatcherite.
Bud Light. Yeah, I guess it is. It has "ite" has kind of garnered a pejorative. It usually seems like a suffix in words that are pejoratives of others. Yeah,
Hey,
but
anti-Semite,
Samsonite.
So like anti-Semite started as things people called themselves, and there are people who still call themselves anti-Semites.
So it was identifying with rather than now it's identifying against. So if you're against Jews, you identify against them. But
well, no. They all anti-Semites were like, this was the term they came up with because they were like, back then in Germany, this was a viable political position.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was gonna give the transition from positive to negative in one of the weird places I looked up religiously, not intentionally looking it up religiously, but discovering it was, do you know that the term addiction used to be a positive reference to the dedication of an adherent in a religious order.
Wow.
Yeah. I was like, what?
The word Semitic was coined by German Orientalist August Ludwig von Schlotzer. I hope I'm saying that right. In 1788 to designate a group of languages. The origin of anti-Semitic terminologies is found in the responses of Moritz Steinschneider to the views of Ernest Renan. As Alex Bein writes, the compound anti-Semitism appears to have been used first by Steinschneider, who challenged Renan on an account of his anti-Semitic prejudices, his derogation of the Semites as a race. Avner Falk similarly writes, the German word antisemitisch was first used in 1860 by the Austrian Jewish scholar Moritz Steinschneider in the phrase antisemitisch Vorurteil. I have no idea. Pseudoscientific theories concerning race, civilization, and progress had become quite widespread in Europe in the second half of the 19th century, especially as Prussian nationalistic historian Heinrich von Treitschke. I can't say any of these words.
Put it in chat. I'll say it for you.
How's your German?
Probably a little bit better than yours. I'll have a go.
Apparently, a lot better than mine. Here, I'll pull it up. Where is the? Stop.
You don't read like Heidegger without like getting tongue twisters in German. So, okay, where we're at?
Pseudoscience. Here, let me make it bigger. Where were we? Pseudoscientific theories.
Scientific. Heinrich von Treitschke did most promote this form of racism. He coined the term "the Jews are a misfortune," which would be later widely used by the Nazis. According to Avner Falk, Treitschke uses the term Semitic almost synonymously with Jewish, in contrast to Renan's use of it to refer to a whole range of peoples, based generally on linguistic criteria. According to Jonathan M. Hess, the term was originally used by its authors to stress radical difference between their own anti-Semitism and early forms of antagonism towards Jews and Judaism. 1879, German journalist Wilhelm Marr published a pamphlet, Der Sieg der Juden über das Judentum, von nicht konfessionellen Standpunkt aus betrachtet, the victory of Jewish spirit over the Germanic spirit, observed from a non-religious perspective, in which he used the word Semitus interchangeably with the word Judentum to denote both Jewry, the Jews as a collective, and Jewishness, the quality of being Jewish, or the Jewish spirit. The use of the word Semitus was followed by a coining of anti-Semitus, which was used to indicate opposition to the Jews as a people and opposition to the Jewish spirit, which Marr interpreted as infiltrating German culture. His next pamphlet, Der Weg zum Sieger des Germanentums über das Judentum, The Way to Victory of the Germanic Spirit over the Jewish Spirit, 1880, presents the development of Marr's ideas further and may present the first published use of the German word anti-Semitus, anti-Semitism. The pamphlet became very popular. In the same year, Marr founded the Anti-Semitism Liga, League of Anti-Semites, apparently to follow the Anti-Kanzler Liga.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I mean, the Wikipedia article is there, and
full thing. But,
yeah. Okay.
Got the most important part.
Look up victim and victor. I'm gonna have to do that. Okay, I am going to end the stream so that.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Thanks, Andre. It was fun.